Hello, everyone, and welcome to another exciting edition of Training Unleashed. Today, I think we are extremely lucky. I'm not great with pronouncing names. Anyone who listens to the show knows this, but we have Jennifer Colosimo. Did I get that right, Jennifer?
Yes.
Yay!
Yes.
She is a senior vice president with FranklinCovey. She's a thought leader, and she is an author. And I don't know how many people know this or don't know this, but this is actually the 20th anniversary of the 7 Habits. And
30th, Evan, 30th.
30th anniversary of the 7 Habits.
Yes, sir.
And to me, they're like a building block. You know, it's sort of like, where do you start? And these are sort of like grounding principles that I think every good business should run. I would imagine you agree with that, Jennifer. Is that true?
I think so.
So we all know right now, and some people, because not everyone listens right away, Jennifer. Some people might listen after the pandemic is over, which would be kind of cool because then we could hear what we're talking about. But I've asked Jennifer to do something very interesting, and that is to talk about the FranklinCovey company itself and how it applies the 7 principles to dealing with the change that's happening in the world today. And then we're going to take some time at the end and talk about each of us as people and how to use the 7 habits in our life. So this really should be a fantastic episode. So Jennifer, why don't I just turn it over to you and tell us how things are going and what you guys are doing.
Well, and I appreciate that some will be listening to this after the fact, but first, to go out to your listeners and recognize we're all facing a really unique challenge. And as we apply the 7 habits of highly effective people, those principles are timeless. Even though we're at the 30th anniversary, it's the practices of how you apply pretty timeless principles: choice, empathy, purpose, right? We may have said synergy, but that also means agility and innovation. How you apply those now is different, but the principles upon which it's based are timeless and have been in use for a long time. So I'll give you a couple of examples, and then Evan, let me know where we could go that would be most useful. Probably like most of you in the initial shock, the primary thing that we started with as an organization, and I've heard so many that do this, is empathy. That's out of our habit 5, seek first to understand, then to be understood. And typically the habits build when you're a person building them into your life. But it was and is a time to start with, first for your employees, are you healthy? Are you safe? And also then for your clients, what's happening in your environment and how can I help? That was our first really instinct and use of the principles to say, what can we do to help? Let's listen to what people are asking for. In fact, we created a 7 Habits coach. It's free, and anybody can enroll in it for individuals. Also started to put out our education tools, Leader in Me education for people who had children at home. It was what can we do?
But tell everyone how they get those things, because they're going to want to know.
Oh, because they're free. FranklinCovey.com.
Yeah.
And then you would look for the 7 Habits coach, and also in the education section on Leader in Me tools. And it's using the 7 habits with those of you who have children from K through 12 at home.
Yeah. So I just want to quickly comment. First off, I think values, principles are things that are really easy when everything's going great. Today or now is when it really is the gut check. Is it a true value? Is it a true principle of the company? Mm-hmm. And we actually did exactly the same thing you did. We went through an exercise and said, what could we do to have an impact in the world? And we chose to create an online training course. And by the way, if anyone wants to email me, I'd be happy to send it to you. We have it SCORM-based too, but in Spanish also, on the habits of how to keep yourself safe. And we use all the CDC stuff, but we also go a lot further. So we have shared this now. The entire franchise community has access to it on the IFA website. I've shared it to ski area. I've shared it with so many people. We think we're probably close to 1 million views. And that really makes the company and the employees, because if you think about it, if some of those habits, because I'm talking way too much about ourselves, but anyhow, some of those habits are about how to create a safe home, how to, shower when you get back, and, a lot of things that, just imagine if we stopped one person, how great that would be. And so,
you gave me a chill. So I'm glad you talked about it, and you'll have to send it to me. I have your email address, Evan.
Okay, excellent. I'd be delighted to send it to anyone. And my email address is ehackle@tortal.com for those that don't know it. And you can always go on our trainingunleash.net website and just make a request there too. Anyhow, back to okay, so you started with empathy, which I think is fantastic.
The seek first to understand, then to be understood, which is habit 5 in the model as it builds. And I think we continually have to do that. There are clients that we're dealing with that are thriving. There's some industries that are thriving. There are some that are pivoting. What are we going to pivot to effectively? And then there are some that are really suffering from devastation. So how do we help them and keep that relationship alive? Really, I think empathy is a continuous theme right now in how we start. And then as we thought about, you and I discussed before we started today, one of the habits that's most well known is begin with the end in mind. How do we help clients in any of those circumstances, thriving, pivoting, or really devastated? How do we help them most effectively with what we offer? So really that begin with the end in mind, and also how do we get to the point when there is a recovery, folks are prepared to work with us effectively, right? And so we have that end in mind out there. We're just like everyone else. We don't know when that will come. It's an uncertain time. I think probably the biggest habit that had an impact on us was there's a model in habit 1, which is be proactive. All the habits start with a verb. Yeah. We've talked be proactive. There's a model called circle of influence, circle of concern. And it applies to individuals, but we did it as an organization. So what you do is you just literally in a strategic session, what are all the things we're concerned about? Stream of consciousness. Some organizations, ours included, many organizations, what's our cash runway? How do we keep our client relationships alive and thriving? Of course, we started with employees. How do we make sure everybody's adjusting to kids at home and working from home? And here's all the things we're concerned about. And out of that, as an organization, what can we influence? And both as an organization, as an individual, it's about what are your strengths? What are you strong at that would be helpful in this particular environment? Of course, knowing we started with empathy. And that's how we got to strategically, how are we adapting in this environment?
I think that's interesting because I want to ask you about habit 3, which is first things first.
Right.
And did you utilize that? And if so, how?
Yes.
And maybe share some of the changes you've actually have made.
A lot. So I'll share both around habit 1 and the choices that we made, and habit 3, put first things first. So we're a training service provider, a performance improvement organization. So we offer services around leadership development, around executing. I know Chris McChesney's been on your webcast before, executing against your highest priority, sales, and so on. So as you think of putting first things first, there's a couple of ways clients access our services. One is we had consultants that did deliver live face-to-face. Hopefully they will again.
Tons of it.
Tons of it. Yeah. We also certify client facilitators to deliver, and many of those did that live. One of our key strengths, as you look at our circle of influence and also putting first things first, is for 10 years we've been delivering live online, very interactively, have a well built out tool, and also can do it, of course, on other tools. And we were an immediate pivot to how do we get content, services, processes out to our clients live online. They may not even know we do it. It wasn't that big of our big part of our business. So first thing was really ensuring that all the clients that have worked with us live knew about live online capability, could experience it, and also if they were certified facilitators in their organizations, that we were helping them build that capability. Was literally and still is number one. Number
Very
two,
I like
as
that.
you look at it is, and I'm sure those of you who are that are training providers, service providers, also how do we service our existing clients effectively? People who have all of our content via a subscription. We do offer, our on-demand, our live online, our live via subscription. How do we best service them right now? And really ensuring that our number two, and this is very clear, our number two, in addition to getting those that we knew needed help with delivery, getting to those that have our content, we developed particular learning journeys that were focused on remote workers, change, right? So using content they already had. Right? So unlike yours that developed new content and had that out there, this was, you guys have all this content, let's just show you how you can use it in this environment.
So let me ask you a question because I'm very curious. What I have found in this world today is that customers of ours are in full out, these are categories. They're not all in this, but they're either in full out, survival mode, like we have, clients that are, 1,600 hair salons with 2 open.
Yes. Yes.
And then we have clients that actually are in businesses that are pretty busy because they happen to be in industries that are, not as affected, although that's not the majority of our clients. And then we have people in massive transformation, and we find it difficult, and I'd be curious what you have found, and is how do you have a conversation about how you can be of support with getting someone's attention and not feeling like you're trying to take advantage of something when they're really in a tough time?
Yeah, I totally agree, which is why I think we started with empathy. So if I were talking to you, Evan, I would want to know, how are you? What's happening? How are you adapting? Can I help? Right?
That was our first conversation, by the way.
Right. I'm sure we did the same thing. And being really clear that that's the only reason we're calling. And again, like you said, everybody's in a different place organizationally. The most effective, if you think of my number one and number two, were clients that were continuing to want to utilize the resources. Ken Taylor, the president of he's trainingindustry.com. He put out yesterday that trainingindustry.com has had an 8,000% increase in people searching on virtual instructor-led training, VILT, and helping with remote work. So really making sure they knew places with assets they already had or work they had scheduled that they could utilize. They may have had a totally different initiative going, but ensuring that they know, okay, but you have these resources and you're in a subscription model, so how can we help you best utilize them? And of course, there are people that are saying justifiably, I can't talk right now.
Yeah.
Of course.
Yeah.
And then there's some that's saying, I do want to talk, let's put it out 2 weeks. And then there are some that are saying, okay, show me how to best utilize, because the things that training industry saw searched on, they're interested in. I think it's a different balance in talking with your clients just to ensure you stay in touch with what they most need.
Yeah, and I think, it really goes back to your habit of seek to understand.
Yeah.
That is an excellent illustration of that.
Yeah. So we focused on what we could influence, putting aside all the things that are so uncertain and that we can't influence, how to keep that empathy up both internally with our employees. And if you're like us, we've, made sure that we could adapt to schedules. Some people have young children at home, and this online learning needs parental as the teacher assistant, right? So adapting schedules internally, and then really ensuring that we're adapting appropriately to our existing clients as our number one priority.
So a little off topic, but what do you think the future of working will be after this? Now, our company was totally virtual and has been for 7 years, and we love it, and we have loved it, and it's been giving people amazing flexibility of work-life balance. But a lot of companies, I was just actually technically texting, to be clear, with a person that I know really well, who was like just saying, "Oh my God, this work at home thing, we were so nervous about it, but it's like amazing." And I'm like, I know, but I think it's going to change the world.
You and I are guessing, but I would agree with you. If you think of our sales and consultant force, those that are face-to-face with clients or are live, they all they do still, but had for years worked at home. So their meeting with the client previous to being live may have been just like you and I are right now, but we've been working at home in the US and Canada for years. Now, the big difference is, of course, we did go face-to-face, but I can tell you something. I just recently talked to a client, and you talked with Chris McChesney about the 4 disciplines of execution. Clients hire us to help them execute on their highest priority. And they typically need an executive team to say what that highest priority is, and then they work with managers to make sure that it gets executed on. Kind of a quasi-consulting process that goes through a very, set track. We are doing that live online using a bunch of tools, the breakout rooms, putting you into your breakout room to work on it, coming back, annotating the board. And interestingly enough, our clients are finding they're very interested in continuing this way because their investment with us was a very small piece of the puzzle. The investment was the travel to get the executive team in one room and to feed them and to have everybody fly in. And so they're looking at it saying, now that I see that you can manage it versus us all just being in a slide-by-slide webinar, we're kind of interested in looking at this for the future. Let's do this right now because most of the things they're executing on are really urgent based on right now. But I wonder about that, to your question, if we might end up doing even more.
I think so. We as a company, we do a thing called a rapid design curriculum workshop, and it's a 2-day interactive thing. And you're right, the biggest expense is the people, their time. We have done them virtually in the past, but everyone will know we want to do this in person. It's too important. And now we're starting to do them virtually again. And the nice thing about virtually is it's a 2-day workshop, but if you're doing it online, it doesn't have to be a 2-day workshop. It can be 4 half days so that people can be productive during half the day and they don't get burnt out as much.
Yes.
And there is, if you embrace technology, and by the way, my first virtual convention was in October after 9/11.
Oh, really?
Yeah, because we had a convention scheduled to start on 9/13.
Oh.
So unfortunately, I had 125 people in the air. The good news is they all got home safe, but it was, now what do we do? And of course, flights weren't flying and all that stuff. So we chose to do a virtual convention. And what we did is, instead of, trying to do it all day, we just did 2 hours a day for about 5 days. And we covered things. And back then the technology is nothing like the technology is today.
Right.
And there's some really cool polling stuff, but let's shift because we're not going to have forever. And I like to talk about the 7 habits and people.
Yeah.
Because I totally believe that the 7 habits are things that you as a person should focus on yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm going to turn it over to you because you are the expert.
Well, thank you. Let's talk about individuals and your listeners in whatever phase of that industry category we put them on, whether they're thriving, really in disarray and challenged, or if they're pivoting. We talked about choice being the number one element, and that is, I think, so foundational to anybody else. I even said this when we were in really great times. People would say, give me career advice. And I would say my number one career advice is to always say, what can I do based on the situation I'm in? What can I do, right?
Yep.
And once you get to that choice, I think the other habits start to flow out of that. So we talked about begin with the end in mind. One of the exercises that is really interesting right now is if you wrote down all the key roles that you have, right? You have an organization that you lead, you're a parent, you're a partner, you've got friends, work, all of those, and thought, okay, what do I want people to say about me when the crisis abates? I'm not talking about go do your personal, we in our workshops and in some of our content, we'll take it all the way out to what tribute would you like at your retirement or at an 80th birthday party, which is really, really motivating. But I'm thinking right now, what do you want if you're in very close proximity in your house or at distance at work? What do you want people to say about you and how you acted, and if it was alignment with your values? And I think having that vision out there every day, if you're like me, there have been times when I've been, let's say, exhausted by the current environment.
Sure.
Or irritated by the proximity of the person that's in my house with me, who I love dearly, have been married to for many, many years. But what do I want them to say about how I was right now? And that's habit 2. That's the habit of purpose and vision. Going to habit 3 then, how do I spend my time and what kind of things do I need to do to be more effective? I've personally had to take up my technology skills. They were okay. You and I could have had this conversation. They were fine.
Yeah.
But what do I need to do to be more effective in this environment? How do I need to talk to my husband, speak with my husband, even though I'm a little worn down with the pace of change? How about the people that I work with, right? That empathy can be tiring. How do I keep my energy up and putting those first things first? And then really, as you look at, we call those public victory, because I can control what I choose, what I want people to think about me, and if I'm behaving in alignment with my values. When you get to the relationship habits, it's harder. But the first one, think win-win, notice the word just says think. I think we talked about our conversation is how do we think about that with our clients? What really would be a win for them? How do we think about it with our son or daughter?
Yeah.
That are disappointed because there is no college graduation. And, the easy thing to say is, oh, it'll get better. But really, how do we use habit 5, seek first to understand, then to be understood, which is pretty much the habit we spend the most time on when we're working with individuals or organizations, is not thinking about understanding with the intent to reply, to judge, to agree, to disagree, but really for me to stop and think, okay, I am going to try to stop this running train in my mind and really understand how Evan thinks and feels about this.
Yeah.
I think that one's the most critical right now, especially with family.
I've taken that principle and I use the term seek to learn the kernel of truth. So instead of listening to why someone is wrong, listen for that what is right. Maybe they're all right, or maybe just a teeny tiny piece they're right. But if you seek that kernel of truth to understand, it's just a different way of saying the same thing. It's amazing the transformation that happens in your life when you're not listening to an opening for you to speak, or you're not listening for why they're wrong. And I know for me personally, that was a big issue, is I didn't come across like I was listening to seek why they were wrong. In fact, I think people would think like I was really involved because I'd ask all kinds of follow-up questions and really seek to understand quote unquote, but really what I was seeking to understand is why they were wrong, how I could prove them wrong. And then I go, Jennifer, I listened to you and I asked you this, this, and this, and this, and this is why I'm right. And then when the transformation happened, I realized the win-win, getting back to your habits, that come from seeking to understand. So I really...
Well, that was beautiful. I actually got a bit of a chill, Evan, because what you were doing is using, and tell me how you say it again, the kernel of
truth.
The kernel of truth. You're trying to think win-win. Is there something here that we can both, that I can work with? And do I really understand how they think and feel? I actually have struggled with this as well. If you think about yourself in leadership roles, at least at the beginning, well, I'm the leader, so I should solve it. So let me just have Evan very quickly tell me 3 things. I've heard this so many times before. Solution. And then I would find I was solving something that wasn't even the problem.
Totally. And it's interesting, first off, I've run a, $5 billion business. And so I have a lot of experience in leadership. And
Right.
I talk to people and I'm, all about engaging people. And, my consulting company is Engage Consulting.
Right.
And a lot of people go, well, they expect me to know the answer. If I ask, then it shows weakness. And I find it to be the exact opposite. And of course, one of the things I love about Chris's work with the 4 distinctions is he's really about engagement. And he does it in a really cool way. And if you want to know what that is, listen to Chris's episode, Chris McChesney. And
the 4 disciplines of execution.
Thank you. See, I'm very dyslexic and I get tongue-tied.
But you got his name right.
Yeah, I know that's amazing. And like you and like Victoria, everyone from your organization is so nice and pleasant.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. So, what you did is really illustrate, I think for us right now, listening with the intent to understand, sometimes that just requires that you don't say anything.
Yeah.
If you're not great at it, nod and have them keep listening. But in your personal, and I think the anxiety that we're experiencing right now, sort of a low grade, when will this end? Things are uncertain. I don't know. That raises the importance, and you said this at the beginning, of really doing our best to fulfill the vision we put down in the purpose and do our best to maintain and even deepen our relationships when it's hard. It's different if it's easy, but it's hard right now.
So when I first read the book, which was not 30 years ago, but it was maybe 20 or 25 years ago. Now I'm sitting back and thinking about it. But it was a long time ago. I loved the book. And it's interesting because I listened to a consolidated version of the book this weekend to get ready for this event. And it was so clear to me that I had ingrained these principles into who I be and the companies that I run. Mm-hmm. And I guess the question I want to ask is, I don't think reading your book is enough. How do you create the habit of actually ingraining these principles into your business and into your personal life?
It's a great question. And you're in the industry, you're a leader in the industry. I could turn it back and say, how did you ingrain them?
I actually have an answer, but I don't want to steal your thunder.
So I'll tell you how we work with organizations to do that. And then I'd love to hear how you did it individually. Yeah. It's called a habit. So it isn't you do it once and call it good. It has to be, as you said, ingrained. And so like many organizations, as we bring this work, whether people are using it for onboarding or to create a common language when they do mergers and acquisitions, or as their approach to emotional intelligence, right? Bringing emotional intelligence, we always have what we would call a learning journey, right? Pre-work, some personal, sometimes 360 or assessments, actual learning, and it might be spaced, like you said, 90 minutes at a time, especially when it's live online delivery, e-learning that supports it. Even if someone's a manager, that they could take it to their team and say, let's remember this. Usually there's implementation, 7 habits in 7 weeks. And frankly, we do a fair amount of reinforcement coaching in groups, right? You're working on this habit for this amount of time, and how's that working? It's got to be at least some amount of time. It can't, and all your listeners know this, you can't just have one training experience and have it be integrated.
And that is so true. And, it's like, blended learning, which is
right.
This very big term, and, blended learning is best. That's, quote unquote, the term. And I think it's somewhat true, but what really is repetitive learning is key.
Yeah,
right.
Agreed.
And I think blended learning is great because you get to see things from different perspectives. And you learn, the more different ways you learn. But for me personally, it really comes from use.
Yeah.
Right. So you learn when you use, you learn when you teach. So when I read the book, it was given to me by a person within the company. And then we decided, this is many, many years ago, to build it into the training of what we do as a company. And for us as a company to teach people to teach the habits.
Yeah. Teach to learn.
Teach to learn. So, people listening can teach your kids the habits. Yeah. And, I would just say also, read the habits and then pick up the book a month later and read them again. And then ask yourself, and then, as a review tool, and this I think could apply to today really well, is when you think about your business and your strategies, ask yourself, are you living with the habits? Have you followed those habits? And, which goes back again, and I think it's habit 3, and your habits better than I know my habits, which is first things first. Is it habit 3?
Yes, sir.
Yay.
Yay.
And really, when we're in the midst of change, and we are in the midst of change.
Yes.
Understanding how to prioritize and how to look at, and you guys do a pretty good job with your matrix. Mm-hmm. Are you doing that? And things of that nature.
I think you're right. I mean, like any habit, if you've decided, let's choose one that everybody knows, I'm going to eat better, or I'm going to exercise more or something. It requires a persistence, and in life, at least for me, sometimes you fall off.
Yeah. Right?
Sometimes you fall off, and there's alignment with other things. If you think about teaching people coaching skills are often based on helping that person tap into the strength of where they've done this before, or uncover their own answer, not creating a dependence on you, but their ability to solve it. And there's so much overlap. I found myself sometimes thinking, that conversation did not go well. What did I do wrong? And then you go back and think, oh, I interrupted them. I solved it too early. I wasn't trying, like you said, to look for their kernel of truth. I was just trying to win. And you kind of know it, if that's what you really know is your value, that now you're misaligned. It feels yucky.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I think that's very true. We could talk forever.
I know.
But we're at the end. You've already nicely given your offer already. I always ask, if you had to give somebody one tip, what would that be? And I'm now asking you that question.
I would say, and I've mentioned it a couple of times in this webcast, to recognize that our greatest freedom in times of challenge like these, or in times that are less challenged, or in any situation, our greatest freedom is the ability to choose how we act, how we behave, regardless of what's going on around us or inside of us.
I think that's a great tip, especially for now. And I just want to take and go back to what you said. If people took the time to create their vision of what they want to create and who they want to be and what people will say afterwards, and they work towards that vision, this time at home can actually be the greatest time of their life. And someone shared with me this, and I'm saying that because I didn't validate it, probably should, that Isaac Newton during a pandemic was in high school, and during that time he created calculus, which,
Really?
yeah. And, like, so, what is that, here, I think the one habit we haven't talked about, and I was going to ask this question, I never did, which is, what's the one habit that people don't talk about that they really should? To me, it's saw,
Sharpen the saw.
Yeah. And we actually have saw meetings in our company, and we give a certain amount of time to all of our developers, because we develop custom e-learning, to go out and find new software and play and do something. And then everyone comes and show, hey, here's what I built, sharpening the saw. And now is probably as good a time as any time to sharpen the saw, to get your whole team, if you have downtime and and you're investing in your team while waiting for this transition to happen, to make it purposeful.
Oh, I so agree. If you ever see the model, it surrounds all the others, because really you are the tool that you have.
Yeah.
And doing everything that we talked about is, and I can say this from experience, it's not a judgmental, I know because I've gone down this path. If you are physically, mentally, social, emotionally, or spiritual, which we say whatever brings you meaning, if those are exhausted, it is really a lot harder to be effective, right? So I love that challenge. I love that challenge of what can you do, whether it's your team going out to look at other software and getting that mental stimulation and looking at new ways, or what can you do in this time frame? Because I know so many people, myself included, get exhausted.
Yeah.
So how do you keep the strength up?
A good friend of mine and a leadership trainer, Michael Strasner, I don't know if you ever heard of him or not, but he's written a few books, and very talented guy, says, you're either motivated by fear or motivated by vision, and you get to choose which.
Yeah.
And I think that's very true. You've been a fabulous guest. Thank you very much. I want to thank the audience for taking the time to listen. I want to wish everyone well and safety, and to make this an amazing time and experience for yourself.
Thank you, Evan. I appreciate the time.
Pleasure.